Look, I never thought I'd be the kind of person to ruin someone's wedding. But when someone steals $80,000 in commissions from you and then uses that money to throw themselves a fairytale wedding, well, sometimes karma needs a little help. Let me back up. I'm Sabrina, and I've been selling luxury real estate in Charleston for 8 years. Sterling & Pierce Realty isn't just any agency. We're the ones handling those gorgeous waterfront mansions you see on Instagram, the historic downtown properties that make your jaw drop, the kind of homes where the kitchen island costs more than most people's cars. I was good at this job. Really good. For 3 years straight, I'd been the top closer in the office, bringing in commissions that easily hit 6 figures annually. My clients loved me because I actually listened to what they wanted instead of just pushing whatever property had the highest price tag. Then Dee showed up. Delilah Marston, though she insisted everyone call her Dee, was 29, blonde, and had this way of lighting up a room that made everyone forget she'd only been selling real estate for 2 years. She had that southern charm thing down to a science, all bless your heart and perfectly timed laughs at clients' jokes. At first, I liked her. Hell, I even helped train her on our CRM system, showed her how to track leads, walked her through the commission structure. She seemed grateful, always asking thoughtful questions and taking notes in this cute little planner covered in flowers. But then weird stuff started happening. 3 months ago, I noticed my numbers dropping. Not dramatically, I'm not talking about going from hero to zero overnight. But several of my warm leads, clients I'd spent weeks courting, suddenly went cold. They'd stop returning my calls, ignore my follow-up emails, just disappear. In real estate, this happens sometimes. People get cold feet, find another agent, decide not to buy, it's part of the business. But what made this strange was the pattern. These weren't just random leads going cold. These were serious buyers, people who'd already scheduled second showings, folks who were asking about financing options. Then I started hearing things. Mrs. Patterson from the country club mentioned in passing that she'd heard I was too busy for smaller clients, and that's why she'd gone with that lovely D girl instead. I nearly choked on my mimosa. I'd never said anything like that to anyone, and Mrs. Patterson's budget was definitely not small. A week later, I overheard Dee on the phone with someone, saying, "Oh, Sabrina's great, but she's really focused on those massive waterfront properties. For something in your range, I think you'd get much better attention working with me." Your range? I didn't even know what client she was talking to, but something about her tone made my skin crawl. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in October. I was grabbing coffee in our break room when I saw an email notification pop up on my phone. It was from Anthony Vega, this tech entrepreneur who'd made a fortune selling his startup and was looking for a showpiece property in the historic district. Anthony and I had been working together for 6 weeks. I'd shown him probably 15 properties, narrowing down exactly what he wanted. Historic charm but fully modernized, private but not isolated, impressive but not gaudy. We'd found the perfect place, a renovated 1847 mansion on Trad Street that had just hit the market at $3.2 million. But the email wasn't what I expected. "Sabrina," it read, "I wanted to thank you again for all your initial help, but I've decided to move forward with Dee for the final negotiations and closing. She really seems to understand what I'm looking for, and I appreciate her availability. Hope we can work together on something else in the future. Anthony." I read it 3 times before it sank in. Dee had stolen my client. But how? I marched over to her desk, trying to keep my voice level. "Hey Dee, I just got a weird email from Anthony Vega. He thinks he's working with you now." She looked up with those big blue eyes, all innocence and confusion. "Oh my gosh, Anthony." "Yes, he reached out to me directly last week. Said he'd been trying to get in touch with you but hadn't heard back." I felt so bad. I know you two were working together, but he seemed really frustrated and asked if I could help. "I never missed any of his calls," I said slowly. "Oh, you know how it is," she waved her hand dismissively. "Sometimes the system glitches, emails end up in spam folders. I'm sure it was just a miscommunication. But don't worry, I made sure to tell him how fabulous you are." Everything about her response felt wrong, but I couldn't prove anything. Yet. That night, I did something I probably should have done weeks earlier. I dug into our CRM system. Sterling & Pierce uses this comprehensive client management platform that tracks every interaction, every call, every email. It's supposed to make collaboration easier, but it also means there's a digital paper trail of everything. What I found made my blood boil. Dee had been accessing my client profiles. Not just glancing at them, actively editing them. She changed contact preferences, updated phone numbers to redirect to her line, even modified notes about client preferences. In some cases, she'd marked my leads as inactive or not interested, then immediately transferred them to her own pipeline. Anthony Vega's profile showed the whole story. Every time he'd called or emailed me over the past 2 weeks, Dee had intercepted it. She'd changed his contact information in the system so his calls were forwarded to her phone. Then she'd marked in his file that he was unresponsive to Sabrina's outreach and requested new agent. It was systematic. It was calculated. And it was brilliant, in the most infuriating way possible. I sat in my kitchen that night, laptop open, staring at months of evidence. Dee had stolen at least 6 major clients from me, representing roughly $80,000 in lost commissions. Money I'd earned through weeks of relationship building, market research, and showings. My first instinct was to march into Mason Clark's office, our regional director, and dump all of this evidence on his desk. But then I remembered something I'd overheard in the break room the week before. Dee had been on the phone with someone, giggling about wedding plans, saying, "These commission checks are going to make everything perfect. The venue, the dress, the flowers, I can finally have the wedding I've always dreamed of." The wedding. Her perfect, expensive wedding. That's when I realized, getting her fired quietly wouldn't be nearly satisfying enough. You know what they say about revenge being a dish best served cold? Well, mine was going to be served at exactly the right temperature, ice cold at a wedding reception. But first, I needed to be smart about this. I spent the next week carefully documenting everything. Screenshots of the CRM system, call logs, email trails. I built a case that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. But I didn't just want evidence. I wanted witnesses. I started with Anthony Vega. "Anthony," I said when I called him, "I hope you don't mind me reaching out, but I wanted to make sure you were happy with how things were going with Dee." "Oh, absolutely," he said. "Though I have to say, I was a little surprised when she told me you'd said I wasn't worth your time because my budget was too small." My hand tightened on the phone. "I'm sorry, what?" "Yeah, she mentioned that you'd said something about focusing on bigger fish. Look, I get it, $3.2 million probably isn't your biggest sale, but it stung a little." "Anthony," I said carefully, "I never said anything like that. In fact, I've been trying to reach you for 2 weeks." There was a long pause. "What do you mean?" I explained everything. The CRM manipulation, the call forwarding, the fake notes. By the time I finished, Anthony was furious. "That little? Are you telling me she basically stole you as my agent?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you." "Jesus, Sabrina. I had no idea. She made it seem like you just handed me off because you were too busy." Anthony wasn't the only one. Over the next few days, I reached out to every client Dee had inherited from me. The stories were all variations of the same theme. Dee telling them I was unavailable, uninterested, or had recommended her as a better fit for their needs. Mrs. Patterson was mortified. "Honey, she told me you only worked with clients spending over $5 million. I would never have switched agents if I'd known." The Hendersons, a young couple looking for their first luxury home, said Dee had told them I was kind of snobby, and they'd be more comfortable with someone down to earth. By Friday, I had 6 clients ready to testify that Dee had misrepresented my availability and attitude to steal business. But I still needed the perfect stage for my revenge. That's when I remembered, Sterling and Pierce employees had all been invited to Dee's wedding. The invitation was gorgeous, all ivory cardstock and gold lettering. "Delilah Marston and Miles Tanner request the honor of your presence." The reception was at Harborside Pavilion, one of Charleston's most exclusive venues. I looked it up online. The rental fee alone was probably $15,000. Money she'd essentially stolen from me. I needed one more ally for my plan to work perfectly, Mason Clark. Mason's been our regional director for 5 years, and has got this reputation for being absolutely ruthless when it comes to protecting the company's integrity. He's the kind of guy who'll fire someone for padding their expense reports by $20 because it's about character, not amount. I scheduled a meeting with him for the following Monday, but I didn't tell him what it was about. I just said I had some concerns about client management procedures. "Sabrina," he said when I walked into his office, "you look like someone who hasn't slept in a week." "Funny you should mention that," I said, and handed him a folder containing everything I'd discovered. Mason is usually pretty composed, but watching his face as he flipped through the evidence was like watching a slow-motion explosion. His jaw kept getting tighter, his knuckles whiter as he gripped the pages. This is... He started, then stopped. How long has this been going on? At least 3 months. Probably longer. And you have clients willing to corroborate? 6 of them. With documentation. Mason leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Sabrina, this is grounds for immediate termination. Hell, this is grounds for a lawsuit. We could have her arrested for fraud. I know, I said. But I have a different idea. That's when I told him about the wedding. Mason's eyebrows shot up. You want to confront her at her wedding reception? Not confront, I corrected. Expose. Look, if we handle this quietly, she gets fired and moves on to another agency. In 6 months, she's doing the same thing to someone else. But if we handle this publicly, in front of her peers, her clients, her new husband, that sends a message to everyone in the industry about what happens when you steal from Sterling and Pierce. Mason was quiet for a long moment. Then a slow smile spread across his face. You know what, Sabrina? I think you're right. And I think I'd like to attend this wedding. As a guest. As a witness. We spent the next hour planning. Mason would bring Anthony Vega as his +1. After all, Anthony was the client whose theft we could prove most definitively. I'd attend as originally planned, just another coworker celebrating Dee's big day. Mason would wait until after the ceremony, after the photos, after people had a few drinks and were feeling good. Then, during the reception, he'd request a moment of Dee's time to discuss a work matter that couldn't wait until Monday. What kind of work matter? I asked. Mason's smile turned cold. Her termination. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. No dramatic confrontations, no scene-making. Just a quiet, professional conversation that would happen to take place at the worst possible moment of Dee's life. There's just one thing, Mason said as I was getting ready to leave. Are you sure you want to do this? Once we go down this road, there's no coming back. Her reputation will be ruined. Her marriage might not survive the humiliation. I thought about all those late nights I'd spent researching properties for clients who'd been stolen from me. All the commission checks I'd earned but never received. All the relationships I'd built that had been hijacked by lies and manipulation. Mason, I said, she made this choice when she decided to steal from me. I'm just making sure she faces the consequences. The next week crawled by. Dee was bouncing around the office like a golden retriever, talking non-stop about final wedding preparations. She showed everyone photos of her dress, her flowers, her cake. She'd taken Thursday and Friday off for pre-wedding spa days and wouldn't be back until the following Tuesday. I just can't believe it's finally happening, she gushed to anyone who'd listen. Miles and I have been planning this for over a year. It's going to be absolutely perfect. Perfect. Right. Friday morning, as she was packing up her desk for her long weekend, Dee stopped by my desk with a manila envelope. Sabrina, honey, I wanted to give you this personally, she said with a bright smile. It was a wedding favor, a small box of expensive chocolates with a ribbon that read Sweet Beginnings. Attached was a note in her loopy handwriting, thank you for being such an amazing mentor and friend. Can't wait to celebrate with you tomorrow. XO, Dee. I looked up at her beaming face, so genuinely happy and excited, and for just a moment I almost felt bad about what was going to happen. Almost. This is so sweet, Dee, I said. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. It's going to be magical, she said, practically bouncing on her toes. Absolutely magical. If only she knew. Saturday dawned perfect and clear, the kind of October day that makes you remember why people fall in love with the South. The ceremony was at 4 p.m. at St. Philip's Church, with the reception to follow at Harborside Pavilion. I spent the morning getting ready, choosing my outfit carefully. You know that fine line between appropriately dressed for a wedding and ready to watch someone's life implode? I aimed right for that sweet spot, a navy blue dress that was elegant but not attention-grabbing, comfortable heels I could walk away in if things got ugly. The ceremony itself was beautiful, I'll give Dee that. St. Philip's is one of Charleston's most historic churches, all soaring ceilings and stained glass windows that throw rainbow light across the pews. Dee looked stunning in her dress, some designer confection that probably cost more than my car payment, and Miles, her groom, looked genuinely happy. Miles is a good guy, actually. He's an architect, soft-spoken and kind, the type who holds doors and remembers your coffee order. I'd met him a few times at office parties and always liked him. Part of me felt bad that he was going to get caught in the crossfire, but he deserved to know who he was marrying. As I watched them exchange vows, promising to be honest and faithful to each other, I couldn't help but think about the irony. Dee was pledging her truth to Miles while having built their entire wedding on lies and stolen money. The ceremony wrapped up around 5 p.m., and everyone migrated to the reception venue. Harborside Pavilion sits right on the water, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Charleston Harbor. The space was transformed with thousands of white flowers, crystal chandeliers, and enough candles to light up half the city. No expense had been spared. The cocktail hour featured an oyster bar, a bourbon tasting station, and past hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more per bite than most people spend on lunch. The centerpieces were massive arrangements of white roses and hydrangeas, and each table setting included multiple glasses, fancy linens, and little gift boxes tied with silk ribbon. I did some quick math in my head. Venue rental, catering, flowers, music, photography. This wedding was easily costing $60,000 to $80,000. Money that should have been mine. I spotted Mason across the room, nursing a bourbon and looking like he was at a funeral instead of a wedding reception. Anthony Vega stood beside him, both of them watching Dee work the room like a politician at a campaign event. She was in her element, gliding from table to table in her wedding dress, accepting congratulations and posing for photos. Every few minutes, someone would stop her to gush about how beautiful everything was, how perfect the day had been, how lucky Miles was. "Isn't this just magical?" she said, stopping by my table around 7 p.m. "I can't believe it's finally happening. And look at this turnout, I think half of Charleston is here." "It's absolutely gorgeous, Dee," I said, raising my champagne glass. "You must have worked so hard to make this happen." "Oh, you have no idea," she laughed. "But it was so worth it. Miles and I wanted something we'd remember forever." She was going to get her wish, just not the way she expected. I watched her float away toward the head table, where Miles was sitting with his family. He caught her hand as she approached, pulled her down for a kiss, and whispered something in her ear that made her giggle. They looked genuinely happy, genuinely in love. For about 30 more minutes. Mason made his move during the dinner service, right after the salad course when people were relaxed and slightly tipsy from the open bar. I saw him stand up from his table, straighten his tie, and walk purposefully toward the head table. My heart started racing. This was it. I couldn't hear the initial conversation from my table, but I could see body language. Mason approached Dee with a smile, said something that made her laugh and nod. Then he said something else, and her expression changed. She looked confused, then concerned. She stood up, smoothed down her dress, and followed Mason toward a quiet corner near the windows. Anthony joined them, and I saw Dee's face shift from confusion to alarm as she recognized him. The conversation lasted maybe 10 minutes. From my vantage point, I could see Mason speaking calmly while Dee's posture became increasingly tense. At one point, she gestured frantically, clearly trying to explain something. Anthony said something that made her face go pale. Then Mason reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. The same envelope I'd helped him prepare, containing copies of all the evidence, witness statements, and documentation of her theft. Dee took the envelope with shaking hands, opened it, and began reading. Even from across the room, I could see the exact moment she realized her world was falling apart. Her face went white, then red, then white again. She looked up at Mason, said something urgent, and he shook his head firmly. That's when she started crying. Not quiet, dignified tears, the ugly kind, where your makeup runs and your breathing gets ragged. Anthony handed her his pocket square, and she pressed it to her eyes, trying to compose herself. But it was too late. People at nearby tables had noticed the commotion. Whispers started spreading through the room like wildfire. I heard fragments of conversation. "Is she okay? What's wrong? Who are those men?" Miles appeared at Dee's side, having noticed his bride was upset. I saw him ask Mason something, saw Mason's calm, professional response. Then I watched Miles's face change as he processed whatever he'd been told. The conversation moved to include Miles now, with Mason showing him documents from the envelope. Miles looked confused, then angry, then devastated. At one point, He looked directly at Dee and said something that made her cry harder. Other wedding guests were definitely staring now. The buzz of conversation had shifted from celebration to concern. Someone at the head table, Miles's mother, I think, stood up like she was going to intervene. That's when Mason raised his voice just enough to be heard by nearby tables. "I'm sorry to disrupt your celebration," he said, his tone professionally courteous, "but this is a matter that couldn't wait until Monday. Miss Marston's employment with Sterling and Pierce Realty has been terminated, effective immediately, due to fraudulent activity and theft of client commissions." The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop in that massive space. 300 people, all staring at the bride in her beautiful white dress, being fired from her job on her wedding day. Dee made a sound somewhere between a sob and a wail. "This is my wedding," she managed to get out. "How could you do this at my wedding?" Mason's voice remained level. "Miss Marston, you chose to build this celebration with money you stole from your colleagues. We're simply informing you of the consequences." Miles looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. "Dee, what is he talking about? What money?" That's when Anthony stepped forward. You told me that Sabrina Holt said I wasn't worth her time because my budget was too small. You made me believe she was unprofessional and had abandoned me as a client. None of that was true." The murmurs in the crowd were getting louder. "I heard someone say Sabrina Holt? She's the best agent in the city." Someone else said, "Wait, what's happening?" Dee was full-on sobbing now, mascara streaming down her cheeks, her perfect wedding makeup completely destroyed. "It wasn't like that," she kept repeating. "You don't understand, it wasn't like that." But Miles understood enough. I watched him step back from his wife, his face a mixture of shock and humiliation. "Dee, did you steal money from your co-workers?" "I didn't steal anything," she wailed. I worked with clients who came to me. That's not stealing." Mason handed Miles a document from the envelope. "These are system logs showing how your wife accessed and modified other agents' client files, redirecting communications, and falsifying notes to make it appear those agents were unavailable or uninterested." Miles read the document, his face getting paler with each line. When he finished, he looked at his wife like he was seeing her for the first time. "You used their money for our wedding." "Miles, please, let me explain. Did you use stolen money for our wedding?" His voice was louder now, carrying across the silent room. Dee couldn't answer. She just stood there, crying in her beautiful dress, surrounded by 300 witnesses to her downfall. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Then Miles did something that broke my heart a little. He took off his wedding ring and set it on the nearest table. "I can't," he said quietly. "I can't be married to someone who would do this." And he walked away. Just walked right out of his own wedding reception, leaving his wife standing there in ruins. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Word spread through the crowd like a virus. I heard fragments of conversation. She stole from other agents. Built her whole wedding on fraud. That poor man. Some guests started leaving immediately, clearly uncomfortable with the drama. Others lingered, probably out of morbid curiosity. Dee's family tried to rally around her, her mother approaching Mason and demanding to know how he could destroy a young woman's life like this. Mason's response was calm and factual. Your daughter destroyed her own life when she chose to commit fraud. We're simply holding her accountable." I stayed until the bitter end, watching as the dream wedding dissolved into chaos. The band stopped playing. The catering staff looked confused. The photographer packed up his equipment early. By 10 p.m., the pavilion was mostly empty except for Dee, her family, and a few close friends trying to figure out what to do with all the decorations and leftover food. I walked past Dee on my way out. She was sitting at the head table, still in her wedding dress, staring blankly at the harbor through the windows. Her makeup was completely destroyed, her hair was falling out of its elaborate updo, and she looked utterly defeated. "Sabrina," she said when she saw me. Her voice was hoarse from crying. I stopped. "Dee. Did you know? About tonight?" I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had systematically stolen from me, lied to my clients, and used my earned commissions to fund her fantasy wedding. "Yes," I said simply. "I knew." She nodded like she'd expected that answer. "I guess I deserve this." "Yes," I said again. "You do." And then I walked away, leaving her alone with the wreckage of her perfect day. The story spread through Charleston's real estate community faster than a hurricane warning. By Monday morning, everyone knew what had happened at Dee's wedding. The local real estate association was buzzing with gossip, and several agencies had already called Mason to express their support for how Sterling and Pierce had handled the situation. Dee didn't come to work Monday or Tuesday. On Wednesday, Mason received a letter from her attorney requesting access to her personal belongings from her desk. She never set foot in the office again. The legal fallout was swift and comprehensive. Sterling and Pierce filed a civil suit to recover the stolen commissions, plus damages and legal fees. The State Real Estate Commission launched an investigation that resulted in Dee's license being revoked. And several of her former clients filed complaints that effectively blacklisted her from the industry. Anthony Vega was particularly vocal about what had happened. He wrote a detailed review on every real estate platform, warning other buyers about agents who misrepresent their colleagues. He also made a point of telling everyone in his network about my professionalism throughout the ordeal. Sabrina could have just gotten Dee fired quietly, he told people. Instead, she made sure everyone knew exactly what kind of person they were dealing with. That takes integrity. The publicity, ironically, was the best thing that could have happened to my career. By the end of November, I had more high-end listings than I could handle. Clients specifically requested me because they'd heard about how I'd handled the situation with grace and professionalism. Miles, meanwhile, filed for an annulment within a week. His lawyer argued that the marriage was based on fraud, that Dee had concealed her criminal activity and used stolen money to fund their wedding. The annulment was granted without contest. I heard through the grapevine that Miles moved back to Atlanta to live with his sister while he figured out his next steps. Someone said he'd lost a significant amount of money on the wedding expenses and was considering suing Dee to recover what he could. As for Dee herself, she vanished from Charleston entirely. Someone heard she'd moved back to her hometown in Georgia, but nobody knew for sure. Her social media accounts went dark, her phone number was disconnected, and she basically disappeared. The only trace she left behind was the wedding venue, which sent Sterling and Pierce a bill for damages when several $1,000s worth of floral arrangements were abandoned and had to be disposed of. 6 months later, I closed the biggest deal of my career, a $12 million oceanfront estate on Kiowa Island. The commission alone was more than I'd made in my best year ever. As I signed the paperwork, I thought about Dee and wondered if she ever thought about the choices that had led to her downfall. The money from that sale allowed me to buy something I'd been dreaming about for years, a historic Charleston single house on Trad Street. Ironically, it was just 3 blocks from the property that Anthony Vega had originally wanted to buy, the deal that had tipped me off to Dee's scheme in the first place. My closing was on a Friday afternoon in April. As I walked through my new home for the first time as the owner, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with the house itself. Dee had thought she was irreplaceable, that she could steal from me without consequences because she was charming and people liked her. She'd built her entire identity around being the golden girl who could do no wrong. But charm only takes you so far. Eventually, competence and character matter more than a pretty smile and a talent for manipulation. Standing in my new kitchen, looking out at the garden where jasmine and roses were just beginning to bloom, I realized something important. The best revenge isn't just about making someone pay for what they did to you. It's about proving that their betrayal made you stronger, not weaker. Dee had tried to steal my career. Instead, she'd ended up giving me the motivation to build something even better. I poured myself a glass of champagne and raised it in a toast to my empty house. Here's to karma, timing, and wedding days that don't go according to plan. Sometimes justice has perfect timing. And sometimes, it wears a beautiful dress while it destroys everything you thought you wanted. The funny thing is, I never did eat those wedding favor chocolates Dee gave me. They're still sitting in my desk drawer at work, a little reminder of the sweetest revenge I've ever served. After all, some gifts are better left unopened.